Hey everyone, welcome back to the React series and I'm super excited to have you. Today is the most important concept that we are discussing. If not the most important concept, it is one of the things that you want to learn about React. In this lecture, I'm going to talk to you about states. And states are actually the most important thing that you want to learn about because states, as till now what we have learned is how to represent UI. Now the logical bit of React is the state. Now state is not an easy thing to understand. There are a few reasons for that. First being that state is a kind of new concept, and when people are just coming from HTML, CSS and JavaScript land, they actually haven't encountered anything like that before. So state might feel like something odd, and initially playing with state might also feel kinda touchy, to be honest, kinda like unintuitive if you say so. So, and the other main reason I always find people having troubles with state is that there is a lot of content outside and not everywhere state is explained properly. And the other big reason is whenever you go to article tutorial slash something, they show you what state is, how to play with it, but they actually don't tell you where you can fall with it, that what errors can you encounter. And believe me when I say this, there are so many errors you can encounter with states that at certain points you might not even realize where that error is coming from. So what I'm going to do in this lecture is I'm going to talk about states, I'm going to talk about possible implementations of states, and I'm also going to give you a slight insight at the very end on what errors might be possible with state. I know I'm sounding that states are really hard, but they aren't. In the sense, them in themselves they aren't hard. State is just a unit that of chunk of logic that I'm going to talk about now. But concepts that attach with state, and the most important thing that I want to stress right now is that there is a thing called the this pointer in JavaScript, and that troubles a lot of people. It actually troubled me when I was learning. So I'm going to show you ways. If you follow my ways throughout consistency of writing, whenever you are writing an app, the methods I'm going to show you and I'm going to talk to you about, if you use them, you won't fall for that trap. So try, if you can, consider my approaches and use them more. When you're comfortable with using my approaches, and on the side, if you really want to understand this whole bit completely, then maybe go ahead and learn how this pointer affects every single place where you use something. And I'm going to talk about it personally. I'm going to explain it to the best of my ability, but at some point if I may stop, then I'm just stopping there because I don't want to over explain. Because if I over explain, then something that's not supposed to be hard and there are workarounds to that becomes relatively harder. So on that note, there is going to be some abstraction, but today I want to dive deep into states. So without ado, let's talk states. Now, what is state? State is nothing but a variable or a property inside our class. What classes do state belong to? Only those classes which extend components. So this is the first thing that you have to remember whenever you are talking about state is a property of a class that is only going to be effective if that class extends the component that we are getting from React class. Okay, so once that is done, we can clearly see that our app extends the component, so we can use the state object. So I'm going to write something called state, and the name here is specific, so I'm going to make it object. Now in modern JavaScript, what you can do is, if you want to have a property, you can directly write the property inside the class. You don't need any types or anything, any specific new keyword or anything. You can directly write properties. Okay, so state is a property of this app class, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a variable called count, and I'm going to start it with 0. So inside state I have a key that's called count, and I'm giving it a value 0. Now what states does is, state can trigger re-renders. What I mean is, if say a app is loading up right now, this is our app, it's compiled. If I go to the browser and if I close this and if I hit refresh, now this current app is loaded in a state where count is a key and that is equal to 0. If by any means I can change this state, then a few things happen, but amongst those few things is one that is called re-rendering. And what happens is, re-rendering is, this method's render method gets called again. Sounds okay, right? So what happens is, the app starts in a given state. Over a period of time, if the state ever changes, then the app gets re-rendered. A lot of things happen, and we are going to talk about all of these in detail, but one thing that is sure to happen is that there is going to be a re-render. Now how can you change the state? So let me just write a function. Okay, so I'm going to write a function called increment, and what I'm going to do is, I am going to try to update the state. So state is just an object, right? So I can do something like this to get the reference to that state. State dot, now I want to get the property count, so this should be something like this, right? Now this is actually not correct, and updating state like this is not allowed in React. So how do you update the state? To update the state, there is a specific method available to you called setState. Now what this method does is, it allows you to change the state. Now this setState is a function that expects you to return an object that is going to be the new state, or directly pass in as the first parameter an object that is going to be overlapping with the current object. So what I mean by that is, say with count you also have a key called hello, or say message. That is more intuitive. So, and here I'm going to say hello. Okay, now these are just keys, and I can do this. I can have any number of keys I want to have in state. Now say I just want to update the count. Okay, so I want to set the count to 1. Now what this syntax will do is, it will actually go ahead and change the count, but the message key or message property of the state object is going to remain the same. Now what if I want to overwrite, or what if I want to completely change? Then you pass every single key inside. Okay, so you copy the whole thing and you change it. Whatever will, every time you return an object, every single time you return an object, it gets merged into state, and only the properties that you have defined will get changed. So it's not like that, if you want to, if say in your state you have 10 properties, and if you just want to change one, you have to write exact same values of the other 9. No, only the values you are going to write are going to get updated. So count will become 1 via this, and if I just do this, then what I can do is, I can have this method being called or being triggered on some button press or something or anything. Okay, now there is a gotcha, and what I want you to learn right now is that doing this syntax you have to do more work. So I'm going to teach you a syntax that's going to save you a lot of time. Remember arrow functions, and remember how we could assign variables to arrow functions? I'm going to do that right now. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to create a property or a value or a object or whatever you want to call it inside this, and I'm going to make this an arrow function. So now what is happening is, the increment is an arrow function that does my state updation. Okay, so what I've abstracted out is, I've abstracted out the detail of using simple functions instead of arrow functions. Now this detail is very important here, and you shouldn't miss this one. This is the most important detail throughout whatever I said right now. So let's do two things. Let's first display the count on the screen. So let's go ahead and write paragraph this, or just say count colon, and I'm going to embed the count here. So this dot state dot count. Now this will give me whatever the count is. Now why am I using a this here? Because in render method, what is happening is I want to refer to the state. Now as I've already talked about to you before, if I just write the state without this, then it's gonna only check for a state variable inside the render method itself. But if I want to access anything from the root level of app, then I have to use this. So this dot state gives me a reference to this whole thing, and inside this object I have something called count, and I'm getting that out. Okay, now I'm going to make a button. So button, and on clicking this, on click, so on clicking this method, what I want to my app to do is, I spelled it wrong, increment. Okay, increment my count. So initially it's going to be 0. The first time I press this, is going to convert to 1. Okay, so that's what gonna happen. Cool. Now I am supposed to pass in a method here. Now one thing I want to talk to you about on click is that this takes a reference to a function and not a call to a function. So what's the difference? By what the reference I mean is that it takes a function that it wants you itself to call. So whatever is going to be inside on click is going to be called by JavaScript for you when you press the button. So what you need to do is you need to write it like this dot increment. Okay, so this is passing the reference of the increment that holds a arrow function here. If I do this, then this is calling increment by my own sake, and I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is I want to pass the reference. If I save this now and I go back to my app, it says count is 0, and if I press 1, then it's increments. But if I press increment again, nothing happens, because each time whenever I call this method, it's setting count to 1. Now how do I get the reference of the state so that I can increase the count depending on the previous value? So in that case, what you do is, the first alternate of using this is just doing this. Now the other way is, it also takes a function and then it expects you to return something, and that something is object. So this is going to be the structure. Now what arguments are passed to this function? The first argument is the state, current state of the app, and the other argument is the props. But I'm not going to use props here, so I'm just going to remove that, and I am only concerned with the state right now. So what I want to do is I want to update count, but I want to update count so that it gets +1 from the previous value of it. So state dot count +1 seems correct, right? Now if I save this and if I go back and if I increment it, now you can clearly see that as many times as I'm incrementing this count keeps increasing. Now let's make a simple game out of this. I'm also going to make a decrement function and see how I am using arrow functions instead of simple functions, and I'm going to copy from myself so to save a little time. And what I want to do is I'm not actually going to increase the value, but I'm going to decrease the value by 1. Okay, so I need something to trigger this. So what I'm going to do is okay, so this seems fun. Let's have the increment button up top of count. So let me just copy and paste it here, and the decrement button is going to be under count. So here I want to use the decrement bit, decrement, and okay. Now if I save this and if I go back, now what I can do is I can press increment, it becomes 1. If I keep pressing this multiple times, it will go to a high. If I press decrement, it will change. Now you can clearly see it's working, but the details are inside how it's working. Let's look at that. So what happens is when the app starts at its initial first compilation, and I'm going to close this for once, and what I'm going to do is I'm also going to close this page, and I'm going to come back to this, and I'm going to write npm start, and this will start our app. Now remember, starting of the app, the count is 0. I start it, I wait for it, and it's going to pop up my browser. It's going to compile in like a few seconds, and it's done. If I go back to my browser, I can clearly see that the state indeed is 0 because I printed the state right here. So count this dot state dot count. So the state is 0 and our app has started in a way that we wanted it to. Now what happens is state is representative of the current logical unit or current logical state our app is currently in. So this state is called the state where count is 0. Now upon changing that current state in any manner does a lot of steps. So there are actual logical steps that happen. A method is called, another method is called, another method called, and in that hierarchy of calling methods there is a time when render is called again. Okay, so to prove my fact that every time I click a button render is being called again, what I'm going to do is I'm write a console log here. Okay, and I'm going to say re-rendering is done. Okay, I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to our app, and this time I'm also going to keep an eye for this. Now if you seen what I did, I just cleared my console, but before there was a message that re-rendering has been done because that was the first cycle, the first time it happened. So let's just toss between which one to click first. So let's do one thing, let's just increase it first. So if I press increment, then you can clearly see that the re-rendering was done, was printed. And let me just increase the text for you. You can clearly see re-rendering is done, and let me press that again for you so that you can see more clearly. Let me just clear this, and if I press increment count gets incremented. I also have a message re-rendering is done. So I'm pretty sure that somehow me pressing the button is making this function get called again. And let's say if I press decrement count, then I also get this printed again, and for the proof the count decreases, and if I press this again you can see it's printed again and count is decreased. So what is happening here? What is happening is the core concept of React works around states, and whenever state changes it does something, and that something involves a lot of steps. One of those steps is re-rendering the UI. Now how can you leverage upon this? How can we leverage upon this is, let's go back to something that we did before. Let's remove this and let's make another property called current page, and let's shift it to 0 initially. Then I'm gonna make a change page method, and I'm gonna remove this one because we don't need it anymore, or I'll just comment this. Okay, good. Now in change page, what I want to do is, depending on my state, okay, say I want to decide where to move next. So what I want to decide is, let new page is equal to state plus 1. Okay, I'm just increasing the state. So initially I'm at 0. First time I call it, new page will be 1. Second time I'm going to call it, it's going to be 2. Third time I'm going to call it, it's going to become 3. But I don't want it to ever become 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write some JavaScript to control that. So whenever new page, and I can't type, and now I can, becomes greater than 2. So whenever I'm increasing that logical boundary of going above 2, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that back to 0. New page is 0. Okay. Now I can comfortably change this and assign this to whatever I want to. So my key is current page, and I did a mistake here. I want to get current page out of that. So I want to update current page with new page. Okay. Till now it's good, right? Now I also want to change a few things here. Let's just remove this line once, because I don't think we need it anymore and we have done the logical explanation. Here I want to do a change, and I want to call it change page button, change page, and I'm going to also change it here, change page button. Okay. And now coming from that same logic we did previously, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a conditional, then I'm going to be like this dot that I didn't intend to do, state dot current page is equal to 0. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a paragraph. So P says home page, and I could have done conditionals and everything. A lot of tricks can be done here, creating your own logical UI component and lots of that, but we are going to do that later. So if not, then if this dot state dot current page is 1, then what I want to do is I want to display a paragraph saying about page. And if both of these conditions are not there, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be like, okay, then I am 100% at contacts page. And I'm also going to do that here. Now if I save this and if I go back, and I'm just gonna close this for a bit. Okay. Currently I'm at my home page. I'm going to change my page. I'm at about page. I'm going to change my page again, and I can cycle through now. So if I do it a little slower, I'm at my about page, I go back, I'm at my contacts page, then I go back, I'm at my home page. So what's happening here? I am conditionally changing the state, and based on that state I'm getting a different UI. That's where React wins. React can do these changes so fast that it almost becomes zero time taking. React has something algorithm that may allows React to do these re-renders super quickly. If you are coming from a different technology stack, you might think that calling a function completely over again, like we are calling render and a lot of intermediate functions, then you might think that this has to be slow. This should slow down the process. But React is super efficient at re-renders. It can re-render all with almost zero changes at times, because the state isn't changing properly and there is no UI changes over there. So it takes very small time to change the state, and on changing that state, reflecting that in the UI. You see, I am actually rendering that method completely from here to here whenever I press this button. And if I do it quickly, just watch how quickly I'm going to press this button. It doesn't seem like I am changing nodes, right? It's almost instantaneous to my reflection. As fast as I'm pressing the button, it's changing to my response. It doesn't lag, it doesn't do anything. That's the power of React. It lets you create UIs that are driven by state, and then it automatically abstracts that detail of how the DOM nodes are going to be arranged or how they are going to be changed. But it ensures you that it's going to give super flexible speeds and runtimes with all the methods or all the things you can do with state changes and changing the UI based on the state. This is a really powerful technique, and if you can acquire that mental model of how state and UI are going to be interlinked and how they are going to work with each other, then it becomes really powerful. So let's just go back a little and talk about what that interaction is and how it works. Then I'm going to show you a different way of doing the same thing that's even faster, and not if comparatively faster, but faster. Then I'm going to show a few ways that are not going to work, but then I'm going to show you a few ways that will make those ways work. But genuine warning right away that the first two methods that I'm going to show you are the best suited ones, and if you want to use them, you should use those two. The other two are also there, but the only thing I'm showing you those for is a lot of code out there on the globe is written using some of those techniques. So for you to be able to read that code properly and understand what's happening, you need to have a little knowledge of how that syntax looks. So I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do with you now is that, okay, this looks fine to me. Let's just look at the other ways how we can do this. So I'm going to just delete all this, and I'm going to create a constructor. Now constructor, if you know, is something that is called whenever this app gets initiated or initialized, or you can use any terminology. So when using constructor in a class that extends component, what you need to do is you need to pass props here. So you got to say props like this, and then the other compulsory thing that you need to do is you need to create a method called super and pass props to that. Okay, I know this sounds a little not properly explained right now, but I'm actually not explaining it properly because these are details that I'm going to talk to you about the next lecture. I'm going to be specifically looking in these two things. So for right now, I've done that. Then what I want to do is I want to create a state. So if I'm actually using a constructor, then the other restriction is that I have to create the state inside here. So I'm going to use this dot state as inside constructor. If you're creating properties of an object, then you use this. So this is actually exactly similar to writing no constructor and having a state and writing that object. But if we are using constructor, then we do it like this. So what I'm going to do now is that let's just have that same notion, and say current page is at, say we are at 2 right now, because this time I want to start with a different value so that you don't think that there is a 0 or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, whatever. Now I'm going to create a change page, and I'm going to use this dot set state, and this dot set state is going to be a friend. So you having a good relationship with is really important if you're going to do React for a longer run. Now what I can do is I can just simply have that logic again. I don't know why I deleted it, but let's do it again. So new page is state dot current page +1, and this is also a good exercise, so why not? It is making our logic stronger. So greater than 2, that what I want to do is I want it to come back to 0, so that we are always staying in that range. So this is also a mental exercise. If you want to know how to cycle through a given values, then you can always check for the highest and set it back to the lowest. So say you want a button, or you want to make an app that counts till 100 and comes back to 0, then what you can do is you can always increment that value, and then under that you can check if the value is greater than 100 or whatever, then you can set it to the lowest or the starting value that you wanted it to be. So say those are start and end, then start and end can be anything, but just increase it till it's not greater than end and just shift it back to start. I don't know why I'm explaining that, but okay. So current page is new page, and if I save this, this will work. But now I need to have a few changes. What I want to do is right now is let's just make an intentional bug. So let me show you how to make an intentional bug. Here the logical entity is on click, and I'm having this function inside my app called change property, and it's there, so no errors till now. And what will happen when this on click is triggered, or when I click the button, it's gonna call this function. I'm telling you prior that this is gonna cause an error and the app is gonna break, but I want you to see what an app looks like when it's broken, and then we are gonna come back and fix this. So if I click this, it breaks. Okay, it has no clue what this here is. Now it's giving us a clear indication that where the problem is. So let's go to line 17. So it says it has no clue what this means right here. So this is a problem, and this is a problem of having bad references to this pointer, and this pointer has caused a lot of bugs over the ages. So the most efficient way to solving this problem is, what you need to do is you need to go ahead and say this dot change page is equal to this dot change page dot bind, and bind it to this. Now what this mess is, I'm gonna explain. So see, what I'm doing is I'm making another property called change page, and what change page is a reference to the change page method. So basically this method. Okay, so this is a property and this is a method, and what bind dot bind bracket this does is, the problem right now what we are getting is, and I removed that, sorry, I press save and restart it. So the problem that we have currently is that inside, whenever this change page method is called, our function can't actually reproduce what this thing right here. If I just quote it for a second, and this doesn't mean anything, but I just want to highlight this bit. So this has no value to the function when it's called. So what bind helps us do is, it tells this current function that okay, inside your execution, so in this place, all this place, if you ever encounter this keyword called this, just remember that this actually means inside the constructor, and something this actually means that I'm talking about the app. So what I'm doing is I'm telling that okay, inside your execution you don't know what this means, so bind and this will make sure that, but this reference right here means app. Okay, now I know this is a really bad explanation, but you having a mental model of knowing that this function wasn't working because this keyword had no value, and bind will let it know that okay, whenever you don't know what this keyword means, just think of this as the app. Now this goes back deep into JavaScript fundamentals and this pointer. So if you still have problems understanding, I'll strongly suggest you go and read about how bind works and how some other things like, so there are three things: bind, apply, call. And if you are into learning more about this, then you can go ahead and learn. Initially when I was learning React, I encountered this problem and I saw the solution, and the solution was to use something called bind and this, and when I used to do this used to work like a charm. So for a longer while I didn't understand actually what the logic was, because I was able to get my work done, and getting your work done is also a really important part of learning a new technology. You don't have to learn every single thing in detail. If you understand how it's working and you know how to get it working, that's good enough for a while. But then again, if you want to learn this in more detail, then I'm telling you the concept. It's called this pointer, and you can go ahead and look for the documentation at a Google search for bind, and you will understand what's happening here. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to save this and I'm going to go back to the app, and now I'm going to press the button, and no breaking at all, and this works like a charm. Two methods that I've told you that work till now is, either you can create a constructor, and if you're creating the constructor, this method is what you're going to do. So you can create functions or methods inside the object, and then when you are done you can come and use them to bind to this. So whatever the name of your function is, say you have another function called decrease, so what you do is this dot decrease dot bind and this, and done. Then you won't ever encounter a problem of it not understanding this keyword inside the function. And for all the functions that you write in your app, you can do this and they will work just fine. Now this method is highly performant, and this method is really powerful if you're writing apps. This gives you a performance boost. This method also gives you a performance boost most of the time. Okay. And the other one was, if you're not using a constructor and if you have a state outside, then rather than making this a function, you can make it also a value and use arrow functions instead of regular functions, and this will also work fine. Okay, so but don't do both actually. Okay, do one or the other. Both will contradict each other. So as we have already talked about, either you do the arrow function thing, or you make a function, or you bind it. Okay, just use one, whatever feels more natural to you, whatever comes more naturally to use that. I have no personal preferences, I use both all the time, so I'll actually encourage you to use both at few instances, and whichever feels more natural to you, just go through with that. Okay, now if I play with this a little more, then I can see it's updating. Now let's make a little game out of this, okay, so that we can have a little more fun with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to say, so what I'm thinking of right now is we are going to make a game. Now what we are going to do is, initially we're going to generate a random number, and how we're going to generate that random number is, say for our current purposes we have a game that generates a random number from 0 to 9. Okay, so let's have that random number, and it's called random. Okay, guess this number, and let me just put it to 7. Then I'm gonna do a little trick. Okay, and I'm gonna say this is the current number, and I'm gonna put it at 0. Now what I want to do is I want to use actually this approach. Okay, so let's call this one increment, and let's have another one called decrement, and those ideas have already, oh good, we already have that. Let me just uncomment this one, and in decrement what will happen is I'm just going to make this a function, and I'm going to use the bind approach here. So no more arrow required, and yeah, this looks good. Now what is happening here is I'm decreasing the count, but it's not actually count here. So what I can do is I can call it current number, and it updates successfully. Now I can just copy this whole thing, and I'm gonna replace the body of increment with this. So removing this, I'll paste this, and instead of subtracting, I'll just update this. Okay, I copied a little too much, bad copying. Now if I save this works. There is a parsing error. Let me just see what is going wrong. So increment is fine. Okay, increment is actually not fine. What is the problem? Increment. Okay, this character is extra. Let me just remove that. Now it's fine. No more silly stupid errors. Yeah, compile successfully. Great. Now we have both our methods. Now we are going to bind those. So let's say this dot increment is equal to this dot increment dot bind. And you see, I use this bind syntax a lot, and I don't even think about it that much, because I know this approach works. It's been tried and tested by a lot of smarter people, and so I just use it. I even know the logic why it doesn't work and why it works, but that's not priority here. You know how it works and you can make it work. That's the biggest thing. Okay, so what I'm currently doing is that I am having a number that I can change, and it's called the current number, and I have a number that is my end goal. So the name guess this number. Now what I want to do is I want to remove this, and I want to have two buttons. So I'm just going to copy from myself because I like doing that a lot, and I'm going to call this increase, or maybe just use the upper arrow. Can I make an upper arrow? Okay, cool. I just call it increase, and this one decrease, not decrement, just decrease. Okay, and change these to increment and decrement. Now I also want to know what number I'm currently at, so paragraph and current number is equal to, what is my current number? So this dot state dot current number. Okay, now this game is based on luck, so let's just test if we can actually play with it. So we are actually able to increase it, and we are actually able to decrease it, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do something here. I'm gonna add another thing called tries, and I have initially 5 tries. Okay, so what my goal is, I am gonna let the user play the game till he has tries left. So till the time tries is not equal to 0, he can play the game. But as soon as tries become 0, he can't play the game. So what his goal is that he wants to match the number in given tries based on luck, complete luck. So let's just decrease this number, and just let's say it's -2 initially. Okay, so what I want to do is in increment I want to do this, and in decrement I also want to do this. But something extra that I want to do is I'm going to initially check. Okay, so whenever I have state, what I'm going to do is if tries and okay, so chances left. Okay, so initially I have 5 chances. So if chances left in state, because this is in state, right? So if chances left in state are greater than 0, okay, so anytime they are greater than 0, go ahead and do this. But rather than like with updation and decrement, also decrease chances left by 1. So chance state dot chances left -1, and this logic also goes with this. So okay, so I'm going to copy this and change this to this. So this stays the same, but in decrement I am going to decrease this value. Okay, so what will happen now is that chances left will keep changing depending whenever your user presses the button. So let's just code the condition where this won't work anymore. So when the user loses, so the user loses when this dot state dot chances left is less than or equal to 0. So in any such condition, if it's either 0 or less than 0, then we already know the user has lost. So in that case, you could not win, sorry. And if that's not the case, then I just want to have this whole thing right here. So let's just remove this and let's just put it here. just let's push everything inside. Okay, so till I have chances left, I'm gonna see these buttons and I'm gonna see the current number. But as soon as my chances expire, I'm gonna see that message and I can no more play the game because I don't have controls. And that's the ideal behavior I'm expecting. So it gives me an error. I'm sorry, what is wrong? So okay, adjustment limits. I'm really sorry for that. Let me just cover this whole thing in a div. And you know the adjustment elements error. We've talked about this before. So let's just increase the number. And what is my guess? Because I want to lose actually. So my guess is 2. So I'm gonna, my chances expired and it gives me a message, sorry you couldn't win. But the thing is, right now I don't have controls, so I can't overrun my values or do anything fishy with it or exceed my tries or do anything. Now this game is kind of simple and it's based on chance. So right now we are only looking for the condition that say we lose. How will I know that I won? So on up top this, what I want to do is say the first condition I will check rather than this is that I want to check for the win condition. So I'm going to write some JavaScript. I'm going to be like this dot state dot current number is actually this dot state dot case this number. Okay, so in this condition I won. So hooray, you won. I can't type, I'm sorry. So in this condition I win. But if I haven't won yet, then what? Then if I haven't won yet, then I can actually go ahead and check the condition for losing. So if I check the condition for losing when I haven't won, then I'll have that notion of say check first that have I won? No, you haven't won yet. Then check have I lost yet? So you know you haven't lost yet either. Then I can continue playing. But if any of those gets triggered before one another, then you can calculate how you want to tackle that problem. And for semantic purposes, I'm just going to push this in. I'm going to save this and let's go to back to our thing. Now I'm going to increase it because I know I'm going to lose. Okay, cool. Let's just refresh so that we get to the back to the, now I'm going to decrease this and I won because I know it's 7. And that's app. It's a stupid game, I know, but you can modify this in so many levels. You can actually start this game every single time with a random value that you can reach in tries. So say you can ask them to have a random value between -5 to 5 and then you can generate a random value whenever the state loads between -5 and 5 so that they can actually reach the goal in 5 tries, or you can increase the chances left to 10. Okay, and then you can make it more interesting. So if they lose, you can restart the app with a different random state. So if you refresh, you will get a different random state. So if they even win once, they won't win again with that same predictable strategy. And you can do animation and do something stupid and make this app more interactive. I'm just saying that. So this can be a little fun. So let me just change this value to and 7 and be a bad person, because I know from 0 to 7 I can't reach in 5 chances ever. So my chances of winning here are 0. So I know I can press this button 5 times and I'm gonna lose. Then again, I know I'm gonna press this button 5 times and I'm gonna lose. Okay, I can't win, but I coded this thing, so I can be like, I am gonna be at 0. I'm gonna save this and I already won. So this is a really fun app if you are developing this. But if you are playing this and you want your friends to lose every single time, put it at 7. You're gonna have a really good time seeing them get frustrated. And on that note, I'm gonna take your leave for now. In next lecture, I'm gonna talk about components and how leveraging components we can make this given app of ours more flexible. Then I'm going to talk to you about how props and states are correlated and how you can use props in other manners. So say you have a component that is just UI based and you want to interact with the state with the UI component. And spoiler alert, there is no notion of state in a UI component. And I'm going to talk to you about lots and lots more in the coming lecture. So till then, enjoy, and I hope you liked it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.